Hi everybody, welcome to lesson 5.1, Everyday Math 5th grade. We are going to be working on a few things this semester and this quarter, and it has to do a lot of times with fractions. And the main reason why we're working, and I wanted to make sure I started this lesson, is because fractions are one of those things where it can be frustrating, it can be hard, and it can be tricky. But if you use the tricks that we give you, then fractions are easy. So we're going to work on a couple of things today, including finding a common denominator, but there are a few terms that you need to understand. Okay, so number one is a common denominator. First of all, we know that a denominator is the very bottom number of a fraction. So a common denominator means the bottom number is the same. Okay, if you make the bottom number of the fraction the same, then you have a common denominator. Remember, you have to have a common denominator in order to add or subtract. Okay? The second thing we're going to learn about equivalent fractions. This is a review because we've done equivalent fractions before. We did it in, I want to say, Unit 2. So equivalent fractions means fractions that are equivalent. It's another name. So in Unit 2, I remember I talked about how I have many different names. You guys call me Miss Gilman. My son Lincoln, he calls me Mommy. My mama and papa used to call me Verna Worm. That was a nickname that they gave me. Some of my students from before, they used to call me Miss G. I have been called Gilmanator, and this year I got a new nickname, Miss Gilly Billy, which I absolutely love. I think it's adorable. So finding a different way to call something, a different name to call something, doesn't change it. Lincoln calls me Mommy, and you call me Miss Gilman. I didn't turn into somebody different. So finding equivalent fraction or renaming a fraction doesn't change what it's worth. It still means the same amount. So here's an example of that. So if I have 1/2, and say this half is shaded, and then I look over here and I have 2/4, and this half is shaded. Still the same amount. The pieces are just a little smaller. The same amount is still shaded. If I put these together, it's still the same exact amount, right? So that's what we're going to work with today. Finding equivalent fractions, finding a common denominator, renaming fractions, that is something else. We're going to give them new names. And then finally, the last thing that we're going to talk about is when we're finding equivalent fractions, what we need to do. So I want you to think really quickly. Say I have the fraction 6/6. What is that equal to? What is that equal to? So if I have 6/6, I'm going to draw my picture. That's an easy way to draw 6. If I have 6/6, all of them are filled in. What is my answer? Well, I would call that 1/2. So when we're renaming fractions, what you're going to do is you're going to multiply by a fraction that equals 1/2. The way that you do that is you basically multiply bottom and top number by the same number. Because if we have a fraction with a numerator and denominator that's the same, that means that it's equal to 1/2. And you know that anything times 1 is itself, right? So this is something to keep in mind as we go through the lesson today. We're going to be working in our math workbook, page 154. So this is Everyday Math Workbook, Everyday Math, it's Student Journal Volume 2. That is where we are. So here we go. So the first thing that you are going to see here is we have 1/2, and we're going to multiply the numerator and denominator both by 2. So what they did is they did 1/2. They did 1 times 2 and 2 times 2, and they renamed it. Just like my picture on my page earlier, if I show you 2/4, and if I show you 1/2, the picture is the same, right? So your answer would be 2/4. Now we're going to do the same thing with 3/3. So 1 times 3 over 2 times 3. What is my new fraction? For this one, 1 times 3 is 3. 2 times 3 is 6. So my fraction for this would be 3/6. Let's do the next one. 1/2 times 5 over 5. 1 times 5, 2 times 5. Here we go. 1 times 5 is 5. 2 times 5 is 10. Great. Let's look at the problem for number 2. Now we're going to rename the fraction 2/5. We're going to do that in 3 different ways. Let's start with number 1. It says 2/5, and we're going to multiply the numerator and the denominator by 2. So we're going to do 2 times 2 and 5 times 2. What is my new fraction? Your new fraction here would be 4/10. All right, let's multiply the numerator and denominator by 3. So 2/5 times 3. This is how I write my problem normally. I write my first fraction and then I add my multiplication symbols. It's just the way that my brain works and sets it up. You can do it whichever way is easiest for you. Okay? 2 times 3 is 6. 5 times 3 is 15. So 6 over 15. All right, let's multiply 2/5 times 5 over 5. 2/5 times 5, whatever I do to the bottom, I do to the top. That's how I think it. 2 times 5 is 10. 5 times 5 is 25. Now, the next question says, what do you notice about the fractions in the gray shaded boxes? So look at these two fractions here. 5/10 and 4/10. What do you notice? Well, they have the same denominator. They're both tenths. So now that we have the equivalent fractions, we know that they have the same denominators. We're going to use that on the later questions. So what do you notice? They have the same denominators. Great. All right, now let's look for the next one. It says, use the table above to help you solve the following problems. So whenever I have to rename fractions, one helpful hint that I always do is I really and literally write the number right above or right below the fraction that I'm renaming. So I know that 1/2, and we're going to rename it, 1/2 and 2/5. I already have my answers up here. So wherever I see 1/2, I'm going to write 5/10. So 1/2 here, 5/10. Pretend that's not there. I just wrote the other name. It's okay. 2/5. The other name for 2/5 is 4/10. 4/10. Now the problem says I'm going to add 5/10 plus 4/10 is 9/10. Awesome. I want you to try number B. What problem would I write? Not the answer. How would I set up my problem for problem 2B? For 2B, the way that I would set this up is I would actually write, and I'm going to write right below it, 5/10 minus 4/10. So my answer, if I subtract going across, 5 minus 4 is 1. My denominator is 10, so it stays the same. Let's look at problem C. It says fill in the blank. Greater than, less than, or equal to. 1/2 and 2/5. Again, I rewrite the number. So wherever I see 1/2, I'm going to make it say 5/10. 2/5, I'm going to make it say 4/10. So what's bigger, 5/10 or 4/10? 4/10. Awesome. Now, doing this table ahead of time did help. It did make it easy. Is this the easiest way to do our fraction problems? Probably not. But would it help? Sometimes, absolutely. So we are going to go ahead and do another form down here at the bottom. And that's going to help us with our whole next page. Okay? Now, I do want to warn you. When I find a common denominator, I have another way that works really well for me that makes it easier for me. Again, find a way that works for you. If it works to make a chart, fine. If this is hard for you, Just wait, because later in the week we're going to practice a few other options for how to find a common denominator that might make it easier. Okay? Let's look at number 3. It says, and I'm going to zoom in for you so you can see exactly what we're doing. All right, we're going to be filling in the table using the information given to help us. So just like we did before, we're going to multiply the numerator and denominator by 2. So 2/3 multiply the bottom and the top by 2. 2 times 2 is 4. 3 times 2 is 6. That's how I do that problem. Let's do this one. 1/3 times 2. Whatever I do to the bottom, I got to do to the top. 3 times 2 is 6. 1 times 2 is 2. Awesome. So we're going to do this the entire rest of the way through here. What you need to really focus on is these fractions at the very end. Okay? So I want you to try this next one. We're going to do 1/6, and we're going to multiply the numerator and denominator by 3. So 1 times 3 and 6 times 3. What is my equivalent fraction for this problem? For this problem, your answer, 1 times 3 is 3. 3 times 6 is 18. Your answer should have been 3/18. All right, 2/3 times 4. 2 times 4 is 8. 3 times 4 is 12. All right, 1/3 times 4. 1 times 4 is 4. 4 times 3 is 12. All right, here we go. And I'm going to circle my new fractions so I can really find them, especially once we have a lot of numbers on here. I want to make sure they don't get confused. Okay? Multiplying it by 5. So 1 times 5 and 6 times 5. Let's see. 1 times 5 is 5. 6 times 5 is 30. That's what you should have had. And finally, 2/3 times 6. 1/6 times 6. And 1/3 times 6. All right, let's go with my top number. 2/3 times 6 is the same as 12/18. 6/36 and 6/18. If you didn't understand how to do those problems, then that is something that we just reviewed. Also, make sure that you ask your teacher during the live Zoom, because that might be something that you need to review. Okay? Now, we're going to use this page for the entire rest of the next page. This one's going to help us out. The reason why is because this is going to give us a lot of our common denominators already filled out for us. Okay? So we're going to start by looking at number 1. So number 1 on page 155 says, use the tables on page 154 to find the equivalent fractions with a common denominator. Write the number sentence showing the fractions that you used. All right. So 1/3 and 1/6. So I can look at this chart and say, okay, 1/3 and 1/6. I have a denominator of 6 and 12. Let's see. Oh, wait. 1/6 I don't have to change. 1/6 is 1/6. 2/3 is the same as, 1/3 is the same as 2/6. So my trick way, yeah, you can use the chart. But if I look at my denominators and I see that 3 goes into 6 easy, then that's going to be my denominator. 3 times 2 is 6. Whatever I do to the bottom, I do to the top. So 2/6 minus 1/6. We know my common denominator is 6. I'm going to rewrite my number sentence. 2/6 minus 1/6 equals what? 2/6 minus 1/6. That equals 1/6. Awesome. 1/3 and 1/2. All right, let's look at my thirds and let's look at my halves. All right, 1/3. I have a 3, 6, 9, 12. All right, let's look at my half denominators. I have a 2, a 4, a 6. Oh, a what? let's use this 6. We're going to use 3/6 and 2/6. That's how I found my common denominator. So another name for 1/2 is 3/6. Another name for 1/3 is 2/6. My common denominator for this one will also be 6. 2/6 plus 3/6 equals what? What is 2/6 plus 3/6? Your answer for this one should have been 5/6. Awesome. Now it says list 4 equivalent fractions for the given fraction. We're going to do the same thing, guys. We're going to find equivalent fractions. This is not necessarily my favorite way. I don't like necessarily listing equivalent fractions. I am going to do it with these two, and I'm going to show you what to do. But I am also going to show you the other way. All right, so I'm going to start by listing my equivalent fractions here. 1/4. I'm going to multiply it by 2. So 1 times 2 is 2. 4 times 2 is 8. Multiply it by 3. 1 times 3 is 3. 4 times 3 is 12. Multiply by 4. 4, 16. Multiply by 5. 5, and 20. All right, let me do the next one. 1/5. Let's see. This is times 1, so let's do it times 2. 1 times 2 is 2. 2 times 5 is 10. 3 times 1 is 3. 3 times 5 is 15. 1 times 4 is 4. 5 times 4 is 20. And finally, the last one, 1 times 5 is 5. 20 times 5 is 20. I'm sorry, 5 times 5 is 25. So based on this right now, we can have our common denominators of 20 if we needed to add or subtract this problem, right? Now, my favorite way to find a common denominator, this is probably, for me, the most efficient, the most easily understandable, and the easiest to do, especially if you happen to be out and about or if you need to do this in a hurry, okay? I make a T-chart here. Say my numbers are 2 and 7. I know that's hard. 2 does not go into 7. It's going to be tricky. So the way that you do this is you literally write your multiples in columns. 2 times 1 is 2. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 3 is 6. 2 times 4 is 8. 2 times 5 is 10. 2 times 6 is 12. 2 times 7 is 14. Then you write your multiples of your next number. 7 times 1 is 7. 7 times 2 is 14. And I'm going to stop there. The reason why I'm stopping there is because now I have a number that is in both columns. That tells me that I now have a common denominator. This is also called your least common denominator. Sometimes you'll hear that as the LCD. And it is the least common denominator because that's the smallest number that both of these can go into equally, both of these digits. So that would help me when I'm actually finding my common denominator. So this would be the first step in these problems. Okay, so this is where you're going to start for your common denominators. We'll get back to that here soon. All right. Basically, what I did is the same exact thing here, is I found my common denominator quick. Okay. Make an estimate and then solve by finding fractions with a common denominator. Use tables and lists of equivalent fractions above and in the journal to help you. So basically, all of these questions here, I already have lists of equivalent fractions to use. I don't have to do any more math, really. It's already there. I just have to find it. All right, so let's look at my first one. I have a 2 and a 4. So my estimate, 1/2. I'm going to say that's still close to 1/2. 1/4 is pretty close to 0. So I'm going to say my estimate is about 1/2. I mean, it's going to be smaller than 1/2. Okay. My common denominator, I have a 2 and a 4. I know 2 goes into 4 equally, so my common denominator will be 4. Now, let's rewrite our fractions. 1/2. I'm going to go here. I'm going to find the denominator, that's a 4th, and that's the equivalent fraction I will use, 2/4. So my number sentence will be 2/4 minus 1/4 equals R. Finally, 2/4 minus 1/4 is 1/4. Did you see how I found the equivalent fractions? How I found my answer? You're going to do the same kind of thing. 1/2 plus 1/6. All right, so I'm going to go to my halves page. I'm going to find an equivalent fraction with a 6 in the denominator. My equivalent fraction for 1/2 would be 3/6. So I'm going to write that right above it so I have it. My number sentence will be 3/6 plus 1/6 equals P. All right, my estimate, that's about 1/2. And that's a little bit, it's probably, I would say 0. So my estimate, my answer will be more than 1/2. I would take that as an estimate. Absolutely. We already said my common denominator was a 6, and now let's add. 3/6 plus 1/6 equals what? 3, 4, so that's 4, and my denominator stays the same. Oops. I wrote the wrong number. 4/6. Awesome. Let's look at C. Let's look at C. I want you to make an estimate. 2/3 plus 1/4. On this one, I want you to tell me, do you think the answer is going to be more than half, less than half, or more than 1? What do you think? For my estimate with this problem, I know that 2/3 is more than half. And 1/4, it's smaller than 1/3. So it's going to be almost 1. So I would say more than 1/2 or almost 1. I would take either of those as an option. It's a little less than 1. Now let's find our common denominator. If I have 1/4 and 2/3, okay, let me see. Here's my thirds. Look at my options. And my fourths is over here. Look at those options. What is a common denominator that I can use for thirds and fourths? Between thirds and fourths, my actual common denominator will be 12ths. I know that, and I'm going to show you how I did that. I could look at the chart, or I make my T-chart here. Fourths and thirds. 4 times 1, 4 times 2, 4 times 3. 3 times 1, 3 times 2, 3 times 3, 3 times 4. That's how I found my common denominator. Okay, my common denominator is going to be 12. All right, looking at my fourths, here's 1/4. My denominator 12 would be 3/12. Go to my thirds, 2/3, denominator 12. My equivalent fraction is 8/12. So 3/12 plus 8/12 equals what? What is my answer? 3/12 plus 8/12. All right, if I actually add this out, 3/12 plus 8/12 is 11/12. All right, let's look at number D. 1/4 minus 1/6. Subtraction. If I'm subtracting, it's already less than half. So I know that if I'm taking away 1/6, it's going to be almost 0. It's definitely less than half. All right, my common denominator between a 4 and a 6. So using my 4 and my 6, I'm going to use this just because this is the easiest way for me. Do you have to use this way? No. Can you go back and look at the charts that we did earlier? Yeah. 4 and 6. 4 times 1, 4 times 2, 4 times 3, and I'm going to stop there. 6 times 1, 6 times 2. My common denominator will be 12. All right, so in my fourths column, with my denominator 12, to rename it, it'd be 3/12. All right, I got to go to that sixths column. My denominator with a 12, it would be 2/12. Equals J. All right, now let's do the math. What is 3/12 minus 2/12? What is my final answer for this problem? For this question, my answer would finally be 1/12 because 3/12 minus 2/12 equals 1/12. All right, let's look at number 4. So we're going to rewrite the fractions in equivalent fractions, and then we're going to figure out which one's greater than, less than, or equal to. All right, I have halves and fifths. All right, halves and fifths. I'm going to use this one right here. And I'm going to use this one right here, this part of my box. Okay, so I'm going to use the chart this time. Remember, find one that works for you. So my options are 2, 4, 6, or 10. Let's see what this one has. Oh, look, we can use 10. So my common denominator will be 10. So I'm going to use for 2/5, 2/5. This is only 1/5. Keep that in mind. So the same idea. 5 times 2 equals 10. 2 times 2 would equal 4. So 4/10. All right, 1/2. Here we go. 1/2. I'm going to go to tenths. 5/10 equals 1/2. All right, what is bigger, 5/10 or 4/10? 5/10 is definitely bigger. All right, thirds and sixths. We already know that thirds is going to be that equivalent fraction that we're going to use. And guess what? We already did this one up here. We said that 1/3 equals 2/6. So my common denominator will be 6. My new fractions are written right there. Is that greater than, less than, or equal to? That one is equal. All right, I know this was a super long lesson. I appreciate your guys' perseverance and pushing through. There's a lot of stuff that we learned today. So what I need you to do is really think through all of the lesson. Take your time. Make sure that you're doing the work in your math workbook along with me. And then if you have any questions, make sure that you ask your teacher. It is important that you reach out if you don't understand something. Okay? Have a great day, and I will see you later. Bye!